Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hi, and welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. So even though a couple of episodes ago, I had my friend and colleague, Natalie Bell, on the show to talk about self-compassion, I think it's worth it to go a little bit deeper into these tools because I see self-compassion as someplace that so many people get stuck. I see it in my professional life with my clients. I see it in my personal life with my relationships. It's somewhere where we all could use some better tools and assistance in how to achieve the benefits that self-compassion can offer us. Because when we're not being self-compassionate, that's when we get stuck. That's when the inner critic takes over. That's when the old habits, the old patterns, the old mindsets of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I can't, I'm incapable, whatever it is that fills in the blank after those sentences is where self-compassion can really help us break free, get unstuck, and have the ultimate journey forward to self-love and acceptance and truly being able to be present with our potential and who we can be, which can only come with awareness and practice. It makes me think about this Buddhist notion of the first dart and the second dart. The first dart is simply what life throws at us. That's the curveball. That's the shit that happens. That's what we didn't plan for. That's the unexpected. That's just simply part of life. The second dart and all of the subsequent darts thereafter are the ones that we throw at ourselves. That's where we get stuck in those stories, those old beliefs, those old habits, those old patterns that I can't, why me, I should have been able to. My expectation was different. It's with those second darts that we simply beat ourselves up. And that relates directly back to the phrase, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. When we can stop throwing those second darts at ourselves, our suffering will go down. And one of the best ways to stop throwing those second darts, adding insult to injury, making our situations much more difficult, is through the practice of self-compassion. When we're being self-compassionate, we're able to turn down the volume in our inner critic. We're able to turn up the volume on our self-love and acceptance and treat ourselves like our own very best friend. Now, this is so much easier said than done, but it's because these tools, I believe, are so important. That is why I'm choosing to dedicate the topic of self-compassion to two of my upcoming retreats that I have coming this fall. One in September 8th through 11th at Miraval Resort in Tucson, Arizona. And the second one at the newest Miraval Resort in Austin, Texas on October 13th through 16th. Both of these 2019. If this is something, as you're listening through this episode, that your soul is screaming, yes, I need these tools because I see the areas in my life in which I'm suffering greater for getting and staying so stuck. So if your soul is speaking to you, if your heart is bouncing with energy to say, help me, guide me, Jory, then you're in luck. I have just a few spots left in each of the retreats, and the contact information is on my website, joryrose.com, or they'll also be in the show notes. And also stay tuned to the end of the episode because I'm going to be giving you some free resources, some additional materials I've put together that I think is a really great starting point for delving deeper into self-compassion for you to get started right now after this episode is done. Click on the link that I'm going to give you at the end, and it was going to give you some really solid research-based attainable tools to get started right now. And I'm going to go over some of them in this episode, but some of them I'm going to save for what you can do on your own. But like I said, I see self-compassion as the key to truly unlocking our present moment happiness. because we have so much good around us. We have so many positive experiences. We have great relationships. We have great friendships. And we are often the ones that get stuck in our own way, relying on those old habits, those old belief systems, those old stories that are simply outdated. And they simply do not need to take up residence in your mind, in your body, and certainly not in your relationships. That's going to allow you to thrive. So some of this might be a bit of a repeat of some previous episodes, but I think in the context of delving deeper into these tools, it's really worthwhile to go back and put all of the information together. So when we talk about self-compassion, it's really important to understand the research around it. This is not just me saying, hey, this is a really good thing to practice because it'll make you feel better. But these are research-based tools that have been linked to overall increasing your sense of well-being. So research shows when you practice self-compassion, you have an increase in your life satisfaction, in your happiness, your confidence. You're able to be more grateful, more optimistic. You're going to have an increase in your immune function. You're able to deal with more challenges. You have a better ability at coping. You're more resilient, more likely to persist. You have more personal responsibility of your own actions. You take more motivation to get things done because you believe in yourself. You're able to repair past mistakes. You have better health habits. You have more supportive relationships because you're more forgiving. All amazing things that have been linked to self-compassion, as well as a decrease in anxiety, depression, stress, perfectionism, shame, body dissatisfaction, less fear of failure. You're less controlling. You're less verbally aggressive. You are more present, and you're more accepting in yourself and others. So with that ability to rely on, this is what research says can happen. I think there really is no one who is immune from gaining these tools. It's just we simply have to get out of our own way and be self-compassionate as to why self-compassion is so hard. So when we talk about self-compassion, there's 3 different components, and this is all based on the research of Kristen Neff, and she's one of the leading researchers on the topic, and she says there's 3 components that all are in interplay. One is common humanity. This is understanding that we are part of a greater common human experience. The emotions we feel, the thoughts that we think, while may be unique to us, are not unique to being human. Life is imperfect, and if we can remember that we are not alone in our suffering, that we are not the only ones who's ever felt what we're feeling, then that thought can help alleviate some of the suffering that you're experiencing because it's part of being human. Which then goes to the next piece of the components of self-compassion, which is the mindfulness, to allow and accept whatever is arising in the present moment without judgment. To be mindful is to notice when the mind goes into the past where it ruminates and gets stuck and says, if only that wouldn't have happened, if only I wouldn't have said that. And to notice when the mind goes to the future and says, what if, the fear of the unknown and our anxieties. And that's the practice of allowing to be present with whatever is arising, even if it's hard, to say, I can get through this. I can honor this moment. I can tap into my breath to calm my brain, calm my body. If my breath is hard to access, then I can ground myself into my body, into my sensory experience in the present moment to help calm the brain, calm the body, and come back to that deep level of allowing and accepting. Of course, all of this is easier said than done, and that's why it's a practice. The last piece with the 3 components of self-compassion is kindness. And this is where we increase our empathy for ourselves. We have greater connection, concern for others. We're non-judgmental. We are soothing and self-comforting. And if we can remember to say the words in our mind like we would tell a friend who is in need, because our inner critic can be really loud and really mean and really judgmental and have a really mean tone of voice. So to be more kind is to notice when that inner critic is coming up and to quiet it down with a softer, gentler tone and attention to ourselves and our needs. So these three components, they are all in an overlap, they all have an interplay, and yet they're all separate and distinct. And when we can remember these separate components, then it's an easier ability to start delving deeper into these tools. But I also want to give some greater context in understanding what's happening in our brain, because I think one of the ways we can tap into greater humanity around our experience is to understand the brain and the body connection and how our emotions and thoughts have that interplay. And when we can remember, again, common humanity, we're not the only ones feeling this. This happens to all of us. So we can cut ourselves a break, not be so hard on ourselves, and remember, oh, this is a pattern my brain is used to doing. I can notice the pattern, have compassion for the fact that my brain is doing what it's really been designed to do, and then come back to my practice and my tools. So, what is happening? Well, we know when we feel a threat, whether it's perceived or real, because remember, the brain doesn't know the difference between a bear in the cave or a shadow that we perceive as a bear. Remember, when we're cavemen, that's where our brain's evolution began. So when we feel a threat, our brain goes into the sympathetic nervous system response, in which we have three things occurring. There's fight, there's flight, and there's freeze. And that was designed for our bodies and our minds and our body and our brains to be able to be prepared to fight the bear or run from the bear. And modern day analogies, we're not really fighting and running from bears, but we do often have the same response or reaction when there is a threat to our sense of self, to our sense of security, when we feel our emotions or character are being under attack. So our brain goes into the same physiological response in what we experience. So here's what happens. When our brain goes into fight mode, what we're experiencing is self-criticism. So it's as if we're beating ourselves up for what's going on. When we go into flight mode, remember that's when we want to run away from what's going on. Well, and part of the mindfulness practice is, how can I sit with what's hard? How can I allow myself to be okay with it being difficult in this moment without having to run from it? Well, the physiological underpinning of what's happening when we're stuck in that self-judgment is when we go into flight mode, we want to isolate. We want to run away. When we want to run away, it's out of self-protection. It's as if our brain is telling us, this is too painful to sit with. I need to get out of this situation. When we go into freeze mode, we get stuck in rumination. That's where we just spin. That's the mind going into, if only that wouldn't have happened, if only that would have been different. Why did I say that? Why did I do that? So remember, we have these threats to our self-concept, and it's the same reaction as if we are having a physical threat to our sense of self. So whether it's an emotional threat to our self-concept, to a physical threat, our brain's reaction is the same, fight, flight, freeze. But when it's this threat to our self-concept, we experience self-criticism, isolation, and rumination. And when we get stuck in that, our emotional brain gets triggered, we release cortisol and adrenaline, these hormones that make us feel all fired up. And so self-compassion is the ability to calm us down. Because when we're stuck in fight, flight, freeze, or self-criticism, isolation, and rumination, we are not able to easily access the tools that we need. So it starts with awareness, and then it starts with calming with the breath and the body. And I'm going to be talking in a few moments about different postures that we can actually embody to help give the brain this message to calm ourselves down. Because once we can access that self-care, it's then that our brain can release the natural hormones that make us feel good. The oxytocin, which is going to make us feel warm and fuzzy and loved and safe and secure. Think of a baby being held by its mother. That's a release of oxytocin. And we can even be able to incite this for ourselves. Again, some of these postures are going to be helpful that I'm going to be talking about next. But I think it's really helpful to understand part of this common humanity is to understand the brain-body connection. So maybe you've identified which, if any of those three, are the ones that show up most for you when you feel that threat to yourself, the self-criticism, isolation, or rumination as related to fight, flight, freeze. Maybe they all show up. There's no judgment in that. So remind yourself, even as you're listening to this, if you're experiencing judgment, just say, oh, that's part of being human. Okay, I now understand how to put a name to that. Because once we can even name what's happening, oh, look at that. I'm feeling insecure by what my partner said to me, and I'm beginning to want to fight back in my own head because I'm criticizing myself that I've hurt my partner. Well, that's going to be inevitable, right? No one is perfect. We get stuck in these patterns. These old stories, these old wounds can come up. So if we can just be aware of it happening in the moment, that's going to be one of the first things to help calm down the reaction to it. So another thing I want to remind you of that when practicing self-compassion, sometimes it can be really scary and overwhelming because we haven't been primed to be kind to ourselves. And maybe we were raised in a family or in an environment or a culture or society in which we weren't taught that we were worthy. So even at the very notion of any of these practices, you might be noticing the self-doubt of, yeah, but this doesn't work for me. Well, just notice that. You don't have to give in to it. And anytime we're practicing self-compassion and you begin to feel flooded or overwhelmed by what's coming up for you, know that you don't have to dive into the deep end head first. That practicing self-compassion can be a slow process. You can be dipping your toe in the water and then back out. You can be going a little bit deeper to what feels safe, and then you can come back and self-protect. I think one of the things that holds people back from being more self-compassionate is a fear of being flooded by too much emotion, and it feels safer to self-protect. But it's in that self-protection that we actually stay stuck. That's going to be what increases the suffering rather than reducing it. So there's actually a term for this. It's called emotional backdraft. And I've probably mentioned this before in previous episodes, but again, it's worth noting again here. This idea of backdraft being a firefighter's term is the concept of a house is on fire and a firefighter were to go in. If they were to throw the front door open to the house, it would add too much oxygen to the fire and the fire might come back out and bite them. So that is a visual of what we often can feel if we open the door to compassion, which means we're opening the door of allowing our emotions. There can easily be a fear of them coming back like a big tidal wave. So what firefighters do to prevent backdraft is they are mindful and cautious to go around a burning house, poking holes into it to slowly seep oxygen in. So when they do open the front door, there's a more softer, gentler response of the fire. It's not putting them in so much danger. So we can do the same thing with our emotions and our awareness when practicing compassion. We can be mindful of slowly seeping into it so there's no fear of that tidal wave of emotion, which honestly often just stays as a fear. And if that does happen, even if that worst case scenario, tidal wave of emotion happens, then you breathe. And just like if you're stuck in a tidal wave in the ocean, the more you fight it, the more control it has over you, and you're going to get tumbled around by that wave. But the more you can breathe and relax and remind yourself, I got this. I'm going to be okay. I'm already getting through this. Then we have an easier time to manage whatever has arisen. So I hope I put this into some clear concept for you of different components of self-compassion, what's happening in our brain, and why people sometimes have that fear of delving further into it. So in giving that as a framework, I want to go into a little bit more of these postures of self-compassion, because anytime we actually pay attention to our body and our physiology, we can gather great information to what's going on with us. Because remember, brain and body is connected. So as we have that threat to sense of self, real or perceived, the brain's going to go into fight, flight, freeze. That's the sympathetic nervous system being activated. And what also happens is we have a response in our physiology. When that gets activated, we feel our heart rate increase. We feel tightness in our body. You might notice your fists being clenched or your shoulders up at your ears. You might notice a posture of being bent forward, kind of covering your heart in self-protection. You might notice a pit in your stomach. You might notice your heart racing or your blood boiling. That is a physiological cue to the sympathetic nervous system being activated from that sense of threat. So one of the ways that we can help quiet down that sympathetic nervous system response, calming the brain, saying, oh, I had this perception I was being threatened, but actually I can respond differently to it. So we can practice by changing our physiology and having a reverse engineering to quieting down the brain, activating the rest and digest part of our brain that's going to allow us to access the tools to get unstuck of the habits and patterns. I hope this is all making clear sense of this huge connection our brains and our bodies have. So, if you notice that you're in a posture of not being self-compassionate, of being stuck, of throwing second darts at yourself, the first step is going to be awareness. So let's say you notice your hands clenched tightly in a fist. One of the first things you could do is to open them up. When your hands are clenched, you're in a posture of being closed, of being anxious, of being stressed. You might also notice if your jaw is really tight and you're gritting your teeth. You might notice the same closure or anxiety or stress, like I said, when your shoulders are up high. So that is a posture that it gives us an indication I need to relax my body. So we can start by just simply opening your hands up. If you are sitting down somewhere right now and your hands are free, try placing your hands with them facing up to the sky with your palms resting on the top of your legs in an open posture. And just notice that for a moment. Just notice the energy flowing when your hands are open. This is an embodiment of receiving, of releasing, of being open. So this is one way, if your mind is running with you and those stories and wounds and what ifs and the inner critic is loud, try being in a posture where you're opening up your hands. This is often a similar posture we might do in meditation. It's for the same thing because we want to embody a posture that supports the brain and body in being present, being open, being calm, being relaxed, and being receiving. Another posture we can embody is open arms. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. And again, I encourage you, if you are somewhere that you are hands-free and it's safe to do so, like you're not driving, to try on these postures as I describe them. So 2 different ways to do open arms. One of them is something that I do every single morning as part of my morning practice, my daily practice for grounding myself, for staying centered, for staying balanced. And this is a heart opening. So try on the posture of opening your arms up, spreading them outwards, and facing up towards the sky or the heavens, whatever you want to call it. And you are literally opening up your chest with outstretched arms. Just notice how that feels. Try this posture on and embody the energy that it's bringing to you. The very first time I ever did a heart opening, I burst into tears. It felt so open and so vulnerable, but it was also an awareness that I had kept myself very closed off. So this is a posture that I like to be open and receive, and it's receiving whatever it is you're needing. And we'll talk in a few moments about how you can give yourself what you need for that. So that's one open arm posture in that heart opening position. Another is imagine your arms being open like you're giving a big group hug. So this posture can embody that common humanity. It can embody inclusiveness, remembering that you are not the only one who's ever experienced what you're going through. You are unique, but your problems are not. So when we can remember that common humanity and embrace our humanness, then we can begin to alleviate the pressure of why me? Okay? So another posture that we can do with our arms, and this is something that Kate Moyer on last week's episode talks about, which I absolutely love as a reminder, is just to know how our brain does not know the difference between a real or perceived threat. Our brain does not know the difference from a hug from somebody else versus a hug we can give ourselves. And all the research on touch and attachment has shown the importance of touch, especially in releasing that oxytocin that makes us feel safe and secure and warm and fuzzy and loved. So if you are feeling really stuck in judgment, your inner critic has taken over, give yourself a hug. So go ahead and do that right now for a moment, wrapping your arms around you, placing them however far you can reach, whether you can get around to your back or maybe you're just crossing your arms around so you're grabbing the opposite shoulder or the biceps or the triceps, wherever you can access. And hold it for just a moment. And imagine it is as if someone you love and trust very, very much is hugging and holding you, saying, it's going to be okay. So this is reminders that we can give ourselves what we often turn to others to give us. Okay, on to the next posture. When we are feeling that tightness or tension in our body, we want to release it. We want to offer ourselves some compassion and kindness. Try putting your hands over your heart. You can have it kind of in an open palm position where you have maybe your left hand on your heart and your right hand on top of it, and just hold it there for a moment. So again, if you can, embody this posture now and just see how it feels. You can even take the top hand and kind of rub it gently over the bottom hand as if you're giving that kind touch, that soothing touch that maybe a loved one would give you or a parent to a young child, as if to say, it's going to be okay. You got this. So this hand over the heart embodies self-love and warmth and comfort. Another posture with the hands on the heart is a little bit more of a strength position. So instead of an open palmed hand, you can put a fist over your heart and maybe even just kind of pound it a little bit. And this is a gentle reminder of your personal strength, that you are strong. This is you saying, I got this, I can do this. This is having belief in yourself. And if you ever really need to embody an overall full body posture, try what is called warrior stance. And this is where, coming from a martial arts tradition, this is where you get really centered and really grounded. And instead of standing up straight and tall with your feet right next to each other in a straight pencil line, this is where you spread your legs one in front of the other, maybe 1.5 feet apart, and you have a slight bend in your knee. So you are physically grounded and centered. And to think about martial arts, someone's going to have a harder time knocking you down the more grounded and the more centered that you are. So embodying these different postures is a way that you can give yourself and your physiology a break. It's also been shown that when you smile, even if you smile on purpose, that it activates muscles that tells your brain you're happy. So even if you're struggling, forcing a smile, your brain doesn't know if you're forcing it or not, but it will release positive hormones when it gets activated. So even try smiling when you're struggling through something. And again, studies have shown that another way to calm down the amygdala, that emotional alarm in our brain, is to name what's arising. So to say, this is really hard right now. Not only are you giving yourself a compassionate break when you say that, or even if you say, this is what pain feels like. This is fear showing up. Whenever you can say that, you are not only reminding the brain to calm down, you are observing whatever you're experiencing rather than being in the middle of it. And you're allowing the self-compassion to tap into the common humanity. You are being more kind by the tone of voice in which you're saying it with. And you're also being more mindful by allowing and accepting what's arising without judgment. So don't underestimate the power of naming what's arising. It activates all components. And be aware of the tone of voice. Because just as in any communication practice, there are 4 components that are going to make communication effective, one of which is obviously the words that we say, but how they get, deeper impacted is by the tone, the volume, and your body language. So be aware when we're talking to ourselves in a self-compassionate way, we want to embody a tone and a volume and the body language towards kindness and towards acceptance. So hopefully this has given you some really deeper understanding of the brain and the body connection into how we can bring more self-compassion into our lives. And I want to say one more thing, that one of the ways that we can also ground ourselves in our physiology, and we talk about the breath is going to calm the brain, the breath is going to calm the body, the breath is going to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest part of our brain. But sometimes when we're really overwhelmed, it can be hard to access the breath. So I always want to remind you, if you're feeling too anxious, too overwhelmed, the breath doesn't feel calming to you, it's a reminder to ground externally. That's where we can ground into our feet, wiggling your feet in your shoes, feeling your feet on the ground. Even you can ground into your hands by touching your thumbs to your fingertips or moving your fingers around, bringing awareness and attention to your hands. This will help ground yourself into the present moment, which will allow you to calm yourself down, because we know that brain needs to be calmed down before we can allow ourselves to access the tools, to have the mindfulness, to say the kind words. So it all goes together. And if you want more tools on this, if this is like, yes, this is great, but give me more, then I am offering to you some free material. The access link is going to be inside the show notes. And there are 10 tips that I think you can start immediately. As soon as we're done with this, that you can start immediately bringing into your life to bring more self-compassion into your life so you can get unstuck and journey forward to living your best life. It's possible, and I know it's possible. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean it's always going to work. And what I mean by it's not always going to work is be kind to yourself, that it's a practice. Every single time you practice, you are strengthening the muscle of your brain to get stronger, to develop a new response pattern to old triggers. And that's simply what we're doing here. So if you'd like access to those tools, click on the link in the show notes, and I hope that you can implement them. And please, as part of my community, reach out. Let me know how this is working for you. Let me know where you're stuck. If you haven't already, follow me on Instagram and on Facebook, and you can request to be included into my exclusive Facebook group, Journey Forward, where you'll have direct access to me at all times and daily tips and tools and videos. So I'm here to guide you. I'm here to support you. I'm here to tell you, you got this. You can do this. It's not always going to be easy, but I will hold the space that it's possible. And how do I know? Because you're human. And because if I can do it, you can do it. That does not mean we're going to have 100% success. That does not always mean it's going to feel good, but we are able to continue to practice. So cheers on the journey forward. And I support you in this practice and developing these tools. And remember, there's lots of ways to access me if you want to delve in deeper and you'd like to work with me around I keep getting stuck. So in whatever capacity you need, I am here for you.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.